Marc-André is our product manager here at Toon, and he's our expert harmony guru. And he'll be doing this 45-minute webinar on the Harmony server. So basically, he'll be giving you an overview of the server. He'll be talking about palettes, excuse me, and we'll go into some information about the palettes and concept rigs, templates, master rigs, and setting up different scenes and batch rendering as well. So basically, we have a lot to cover in about 45 minutes. We always reserve the last 15 minutes of the webinar for questions. As Marc-André is going through the webinar, please feel free to type in your questions, and we'll come back to them in the end, in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. So I'll pass it over to Marc-André now. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for this webinar. As Desi said, today I'll be talking about the Harmony server and how the Harmony server has all the tools that you need to work in an efficient production pipeline, whether it's a TV production or a feature film or any type of large or more complex project that require a pipeline, a solid pipeline. I'll start with an overview of the Harmony server, how to structure the data on the Harmony server for your production. I will also be talking about the colors and the concept of palette lists, how they're used when creating rigs, and what are the different places you can store them. And the next topic will be about the templates and how you can create templates and manage templates or your character rigs, your master rigs, your puppets for a production when you're using the Harmony server. Now, a lot of the concepts that I'll be going over today are not exclusive to Harmony server, but some of the features that I'll be showing are. So a lot of the concept you'll be able to use if you're using Harmony on its own. So I'll try to mention that whenever it's possible. All right, now let's start with the Harmony server. So to manage your scenes and your data on your Harmony server, you'll need to use the control center. So I'll start the control center. When you start control center, you have to log in using your username. So anytime you want to work off the server, you need to log in using your username. Everybody has their own user. It's not password protected, but the user allows you to carry your preferences around. So when I'm working in Harmony and I define some shortcuts, some preferences for myself, and I move from one computer to another inside the studio, I will always log in using the same user, and I will always have my preferences that follow me. Now, looking at Control Center here, we can see that the database is divided in three levels. We have the environment, we have the jobs, and we have the scenes. So the environment would be the bigger container. If you're working on a TV production, that would be the name of your production and the season. For example, we have a show here called Toon Family, and this is Toon Family Season 1. So inside Toon Family Season 1, I have a couple of jobs. I have a job for each episode in my my TV show, but I also have a job for my character designs, for my background designs, and for my prop design. One thing you need to keep in mind when you're creating jobs is that the job name always needs to be unique. You cannot have two jobs on your database, even if they're in separate environments that have the same name. So this is why, if you look at the job that I've created here in my Toon Family 01 environment, I've prefixed those with TF, short for Toon Family, 01 for Season 1, and then I have Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3. You can use the nomenclature that you want. It doesn't really matter. Just keep in mind that you cannot have two jobs that have the same name in your database. So when I select a job, then I can see the list of scenes inside that job. If I select an episode, I can see scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I select let's say the character, for the character design, I will have a scene for each of my character that I will be using inside this production. Now, for the scene name, there's no real restriction for the naming like the jobs. So you can name them as ever you want, just 001, 002. It's always good to use at least 3 digits because you will most likely have more than 100 scenes in one of your episodes. So to keep it consistent, always use 3 digits. Some studios like to have more information in the scene name, and this can be useful when you export scenes out of the database. So if I want to work on a scene offline, so if I want to bring work home, or I want to send a scene to a freelancer that's working at home, when I export the scene will be exported with the scene name. So if I export just scene 001, it will just have 001 as a name. But if I use a nomenclature like this one, where I put the production name, the season, the job name or the episode, and the scene name in the full scene name, then when I export it, it will have the proper naming. You won't have to name the folder where you export properly. It will be tracked inside the scene name. So I hope that makes sense. I am really giving a quick overview of the structure over here. If you're working on a production, a feature production, for example, instead of using the season, you will have your environment. That will be the name of your film. So, for example, I have a film I'm working on. It's called Eggplant. And the jobs will be the different acts or the different sequences that you have in your film. And each of those acts or sequences will contain the scene that are part of this film or this feature. I will also have jobs for the background design, the character design, the prop design, the same way I would have on a TV production. You can also create test environment, demo environment in your database. That's always good if you just need to do some tests to put them all into a test environment. So I hope that makes sense. I'm guessing there's not too many questions so far.
Well, Melissa's asking, she right now uses Harmony Essentials, so she's wondering how much of this is pertinent to what she's using, because she's not really sure if the environment is available in Harmony Essentials.
Yeah, so that's actually a very good point. The Harmony Server component is only available in Harmony Advanced and Harmony Premium. So if you're using Harmony Essentials, you cannot connect Harmony Essentials to a database. Harmony Premium and Harmony Advanced can be used in standalone, like Essential is, but they can also be connected to a Harmony server, which is the case that I'm showing here. However, other concepts that I will be showing right after this can apply as well to Harmony Essentials. The palettes, the templates, all that stuff is all stuff that can be applied to Harmony Essentials or Harmony Advanced. I will be using Harmony Premium, and I will be using some views that may not exist in the 2 other editions of our software, and I'll try to point out what you would do if you were using Essentials or Advanced. All right, so one thing that I want to say before I move on is always try to keep your name short. Use abbreviations when you're naming your jobs. You don't want to have huge names. It just makes it cleaner. All right, so now I'm ready to move on to the next topic, which will be the color and palettes. I will show you how colors are linked to the individual drawings inside your scenes, and how this concept really helps you make your production more efficient. So I'll start Harmony. I logged into my database. So for sure, this is not something you can do inside Essentials or if you don't have the Harmony server, but you can just create a blank scene. It's fine. I will go into my Toon family environment, and I will select just a blank scene here. There we go. And you see that when I open, let me just restore my default workspace just to make sure I have the default setting. This would be the default workspace that you have inside Harmony Premium. You have your color view, your node view, which you don't have in Essentials. I have my library, and these are the couple of views that I'll be using the most here. So when I open a blank scene, I always have a default layer, the drawing layer. And when I select this layer, if I go into color view here, I can see I have a default palette loaded inside my palette list. So the color view is broken in two sections. The top section is the palette list. So this lists all the palettes that are available to me in that scene for drawing. And below are the colors that are part of this palette, of the selected palette. If I leave my mouse over the name of the palette in the palette list, I will see the path to the palette in my database. You have to know that palettes are actually just plain text files that contain the name of the color, the RGB values, and also the unique identifying number. So each color inside my palette, they all have a unique identifying number. Anytime I add a color to a palette, it gets generated a unique number for that color. And there's no two colors that have the same number throughout the whole world. I say that, but it's true for most of the colors. But inside the default palette, you also have a color called vectorized line. This color always has the same ID. This is ID number 3. The reason for that is that when you're drawing, working on a traditional production, and you're scanning drawings and you're vectorizing them, all the drawings will be vectorized using the same color, the vectorized line, and they will all get assigned the same color ID. If every drawing would get assigned a different color ID, you wouldn't be able to modify the color of all the drawings of your characters that you've scanned. So this is why. So this is something that's important to know, that this vectorized line always has the same identifying number, because you don't want to use that color when you're creating assets for your production. Okay, so now I'll just select the green color here, and I'll show you what happens when I draw with that, or not when I draw, but if I modify the color inside the palette after I've drew. So when I created all of these little vector shapes here inside my camera view, all these vector objects or vector shapes got the RGB values assigned to them, but they also got the unique identifying number from the color assigned to them. So if I go back to my color here, let me draw something in blue as well. There we go. So if I go back to my green color and I edit my color, you see that if I try to double click my color, or if I try to add colors here, I can't. I'm working in database mode right now. And when you're working in database, you have some locks on different data inside your scene. So if I want to be able to modify the palette, I need to get the rights to modify the palette. So I need to click on the little lock here, and this will give me the rights to modify the palette. So now I'm able to add colors if I want, and I'm able to modify the color. The reason for this protection when you're working in database is that the palettes that I have in my scene here could be linked to other scenes. So many users could have different scenes open that all refer to the same palette, and you don't want to have 5 persons modifying the palette at the same time. And actually, you don't want to have anybody modifying your palette. So if you're working in a TV production or a feature film, you define your character, you make your character design, you define the colors that will be used for your character, and you do that at the start of production, and you create the palette, you create the puppet, and these colors, they won't change. Well, hopefully they won't change throughout the production. So you don't want people to accidentally go and modify those colors. So this is why you have to explicitly take the lock to modify the color palette. So once I have taken the lock, I'm able to double click a color here and modify the RGB values. And when I do that, you'll see that right away, all the drawing objects, all the vectors that I drew using that color are modified with those color values. And it doesn't matter if the drawings are exposed or visible or not. If I modify a color, any drawing that uses that color, the next time they will be displayed on screen will be loaded with the new RGB values. How does this work is that when Harmony displays or renders a drawing, it looks at the IDs from the colors inside the drawing, and then it goes through the palette list and looks for the first color inside the palette or the palette list that has this ID. If you have two colors that have the same ID, it's the first color that's found that will be used. So that's another important thing to remember. I said that you cannot have two colors that have the same ID. That's when I'm creating new colors, but I can actually clone colors. For example, if I take this palette here, I right-click, I select clone, I'm able to create a new version of the palette, call it clone, and now I have two palettes inside my palette list. If I modify the color here, you'll see that, well, that's not a very good color, it's hard to see. You'll see that my green is now pink when I'm selecting the clone palette, and when I select the first palette here, it goes back to green. So it knows that this is the same color, and it loads those RGB values. Now, when I'm working interactively and I select the palette, it switches the colors. But if I was to render the scene, it would just take the first color it finds inside the palette list. So it goes through the palette list here, looks at palette number 1. Do I have a color with those RGB values? Yes, I load it. If it doesn't, then it goes to the second one. Now, when I'm clicking here and you see that it's changing, it's because I have an option here. If I right-click, that's called Current Palette Overrides. And if I uncheck this, it doesn't use the selected palette anymore to load the values. It uses the order of the palettes. So this is something that's, if you're using a lot of clones, a lot of palette clones, you might want to disable this, this option, because you want to see how the scene will be when you send it to rendering. If I want to change the order of the palettes, I just select the palette here and I press on the arrow that points up or the arrow that points down, and this will change the order. And as I change the order, you can see that the colors of my drawings are modified. So I hope it's not too abstract so far. I don't know if we have any questions yet.
We do. So Scott wants to know, can this be connected to a cloud server?
Yes. Okay. So to a cloud server, that's a whole other topic. Thanks for that question, Scott. It's not really related to colors, but so we have another component inside Harmony that's called the Web Control Center. It used to be called Cloud, but now we call it Web Control Center, and it's basically a web version of the Control Center. And what this web version of Control Center allows you to do is that instead of running an application, you open a web page and you have all the functionalities that the Control Center has available through a web interface. The good thing about that is that you can, it's actually just running a web server, and you can expose your web server to the outside world. So let's say you have the web server inside your studio, and you expose it to the internet. I can connect to the Web Control Center from home and start to browse the database. And the Web Control Center has some additional features, which is to export scenes and to import scenes and download them locally. So I'm able to select a scene, create an export package, download it, work on it, and then upload it back to the server. So this is how the Web Control Center works.
So Don is asking more related to the color palettes and what we were speaking about earlier. But what if you want to prevent the palette change by admin only?
So if I want to prevent changes to the palettes so that nobody else touches them. So one way of doing that is to remove or change the permissions on the file. Since all the palettes are individual files on your file system, you can actually change the permissions on those palettes on your server. This way, you're sure that nobody is able to save changes back to those palettes. Another thing that you want to do to make sure that you preserve your palettes is you make backups of your palettes and you store them somewhere outside of your database that nobody has access. So if by accident a palette gets modified, you can bring the backup back into your scene and to restore the color values. So, yeah.
So we actually have quite a few more questions, if I could. Here's another one from Carlene. She wants to know, can you give me an example of why you would be using the clone?
Yes. So I'll be showing that a little bit later, but it's if you're using if you have a character, it has all the colors, and you have a scene where it's night, you will have a version of your palette with the colors for the night, right? So it's called the night palette. And so you will clone your palette, you will change the values to reflect what it looks like at night, and you will use that in your scene when it's night. And I'll be showing that a little bit later. Now, if I want to create a new palette, or if I want to remove a palette, so I have created a clone here, but I want to remove it. If I press on the little minus button here, it actually removes the palette, but it doesn't delete it from the file system. It just removes it from my palette list. So this palette still exists on my file system somewhere. And I'm able to go back and load it back in if I want to. So it doesn't really delete the palette. Now, when I create a palette, by default, this would be the same in Essentials, Advanced, and Premium. When I create a palette, I just have the ability to name the palette. I don't have the ability to select the location where I want to create a palette. So this is a concept I want to show you, but before I do that, I need to change a preference. So I'll go into Harmony Premium Preferences, and under the Advanced tab. Under the Advanced tab, I have an Advanced Palette List option here. And when I select that and I click OK, when I add a palette, so I click Add Palette here, I will have a database browser. And now I'll be able to select where I want to create the palette. So I can create the palette at the environment level, I can create the palette at the job level, I can create the palette at the scene level, or even at the element level. Most of the time I'll be using one of the three, either environment, job, or scene. This really depends on how you want to structure the data on your server. I like to save them in the environment level. So for example, I'm creating a character and I'm creating the palette for the character. I will be creating the palette at the environment level because I want all the jobs to have easily access to that palette. Some people prefer to put it at the job level. But when I put it at the job level, it means that the other jobs, they still have access to that palette, but it's not directly in the hierarchy or in the path. So let's say I put the palette for my character inside the character's job, and I select, it's mostly important when you import and export scenes. So when I'm going to, if I'm working just on my own, just one studio is working on one production, it doesn't really matter if I put it here or if I put it here, because I won't be exporting scenes. But if I work with multiple studios, people off-site, if I put my palette at the environment level, any job, any scene I select will have direct access to that palette. And when I export my scenes, I will be able to export the palettes that are at the environment level. So that this way I make sure that the people that receive the data at the other end, they also receive the palettes that they need to work on that production. But this also can cause problems, because if I store them at the environment level and I always export my palettes, there's a potential of overwriting palettes that already exist in my database. So let's say I have my palette, I have all the colors that are defined in my palette, I export this to another studio, they import the scene on their side, they make changes, accidental changes to the palettes, they send the scene back. When I import the scenes back into my database, if I overwrite the environment palettes, I may lose the palette that I have. But if I place the palette at the job level and I export scenes from another job, the palettes won't be exported. I will not be able to export the palette with that scene. This way I kind of protect accidental overwrite of palettes when doing import and export. But if you do this and you're working with other studios, it's really important to send them a package containing the palettes at the start of production, and that they put them at the right location into their database. I hope that makes sense. The palettes are really a big, complex concept inside Harmony, but it's really important when you're working on a large-scale production to really understand that concept well. So I'm able to define where I want to store the palette, but I'm also able to define on which element or in which list I want to create the palette. I can create a palette in the scene palette list, or I can create the palette in the element palette list. Just cancel that here. So let's say I create a new layer here. Drawing layer, I'll call it 2. If I select either layer, I always have access to the scene palette. So the scene palettes are common to all the elements in my scene. But let's say I want to have a palette that's only accessible when I have one single element selected. So I'll click the plus button here to create a new palette. I'll put the palette wherever I want, maybe at the environment level. I'll call this element. I can type element list. There we go. And I'll add this in the element list for my drawing that I have selected. I click OK. And now you'll see, I move this up a little bit, that I have a new palette under the elements palette. So I have 2 palette lists. I have the scene palettes and I have the element palettes. And that element list palette, if I select another element, is not visible, is not accessible. Now, why would I want to do this? Depending on the type of production you're working on, this comes from the traditional production side. Each element or each layer inside the scene was maybe a complete character, or a character was only comprised of a couple of layers, so it was very easy to manage. And they put the elements in the palettes inside the elements so that you don't pollute your palette list with all the palettes. But it also helps to protect and prevent conflicts of colors. So if I put my palette inside the element palette list, the palette will only be loaded for that specific element. So if I have another palette in another element that accidentally was created with the same color ID, was cloned, if they're in different lists, they won't have any conflict and it won't overwrite. But if the 2 palettes are the same palette list, you will have some conflicts. So this is one of the reasons for doing that. The other reason is that when I create a template out of layers or out of nodes inside my node view into the library, all the palettes in the scene palette list will be copied into the template. So if I have like 5 characters in my scene and I want to create an action template out of the run cycle of a character, and I create a template, it will take all the palettes from my scene and put them in a template. So then when I use that action template back into another scene, I will get all these palettes copied into the scene, and it will pollute my palette list, right? But if I put them at the element palette list, only the palettes that are related to that element will be copied. So this is the reason why you would use an element palette list versus a scene palette list. Now, the drawback of using an element palette list is that anytime I create a new element, I will need to link the palette to that element. So I have my drawing here that has the element palette list here. If I look at drawing 2 and drawing 1, they don't have it. So I will have to link them either manually like this, individually. So that can be a little bit time consuming. Oh, and I put them in the scene palette list instead of the element palette list. So you need to be careful. I select the element list and I put it in the element palette list, and now I have it. But another way to do that is that, let's say I'm creating my character. So I have my design loaded inside my scene, and I want to start to create the character rig, the puppet. I will create one layer. I will create the palette inside the element palette list. I will create all the colors I need in it. And then instead of creating the layers from the timeline, I will copy the layers in my node view, and I'll do a paste special. So I do Control C, Command C to copy, and Control B, not V, Control B to open the paste special dialog. And with this dialog, I'm able to paste a new copy of the layer, and I will select to reuse the palette. but create new columns. So this will create a new node. I select it here, I connect it here, and I look at it, and it's referring back to the same palette. So that would be one way of speeding up the process of creating layers and making sure that they're all referring to the proper palette. So I hope that makes sense so far. Do we have any questions?
We do. We have a few questions. So one is coming from Charmaine, and she's asking, the palette modification is only in advanced or in premium as well?
The palette modification. Not sure what modification we're talking about, but yeah. So the advanced palette list that I showed, so when I click plus here and I see where I can store, is only available if I have a database. So it's only available if I'm using Harmony Server. So whether I'm using advanced or premium and I'm connected to a server, I will have this dialog. But if I'm running premium, advanced, or essentials without Harmony Server, essentials cannot be run with Harmony Server, I will only be able to create the palettes in the scene palette list, and I won't be able to place them in an environment or a job or a scene because these don't exist if you're not using a server.
One more question before we move on. Can I import scene palettes to all drawing elements, palettes at the same time after I've built an object?
So no, there's no easy way to do that, unfortunately. You'll have to load them inside your different layers using the link, palette link, or using the little folder here to link the palettes to each element individually. If they're in the scene palette list, they're available to all the elements. If they're in the element palette list, they're only available to the elements that have this loaded in. The next thing I want to show you is I'll show you the concept of cloning palettes. So I'll open another scene here. So I have a scene with a character here already set up. And if I select a piece on the character, I'll be able to see the palettes inside my color view. And now I want to create a clone palette for my character for the night. So these are all the colors that exist in my palette. I will right click the palette. I'll select clone. I'll select the location I want to copy this clone, create this clone palette in. So this will be the night palette. I already have a night palette, so I'll create, name it night palette. I'll put it in the scene palette list. I'll click OK. And now I have a cloned version of my palette. I'll make sure I have the current palette override selected so that when I select the palette, I will be able to see the color changes. I will right click the color and I will go to tint panel. I select, this opens the tint panel. I can select all the colors I want to modify. And I will select to preview the changes and I will start mixing in a little bit of color. So if I want to make this a night palette, I might lower the value. So this is HSV, hue saturation value. And this is RGB, red, green, blue. And I'm offsetting the values of all the colors inside my palette. And you can see that as I modify the values here, all the colors are applied with that change. I can also do a blend. So if I just want to add blue inside the color, this will add blue or other colors. I usually do an offset, lower the values like this. And now I have my night palette. I'll click apply. And this will apply the changes to my palette. So now I have two palettes, the regular day palette and the night palette. Obviously, I won't load both at the same time. And when I'll be at the point of creating my, my template from my master rig, from my puppet, I will make sure I have only one palette in my list. But at any point in production, if I need to load this, so let me just save that here and let me remove the palette. So if I need, I'm in a scene, I'm started animating and this is a night scene and I need to load the night palette. I will go to the link palette command. I will select the location of the palette, which is in this case the environment. And from the list, I'll select the palette I want to load. I click OK, and this will load the palette in my palette list. I'll make sure to move this palette at the top and maybe even remove the normal palette so that I'm sure I won't have any conflicts in that. So I hope that answers Carly's question from earlier on. This is why you would use clone palettes. Now, if you want to create a copy of a palette, but you don't want to clone the values, you can use the duplicate command. The duplicate command will create a new version of the palette and will generate new identifying numbers for each of the colors inside the palette. This way, you won't have any conflict. So if you want to use this for another character, you can duplicate the color, the palette to use as a base for your other character. Now let's talk a little bit about character design and rigs and masters. So to be efficient, it is important to have good master templates. It's a fantastic tool to bring into your scene and to have your character already set up. A good master template will contain all the drawings that you need. So when you create your character puppet, you will try to draw as many hands as possible to make sure that when the animator starts animating, he has access to the more drawing he can have. It might not be possible, well, it will not be possible to create all the hands that will be needed in the future. And the animators will have to add some new hands in the future when they're animating. And at some point, you will want to bring those back into your main character rig. So let me just show you in the database, so I don't want to save the scene, where would I create the scenes to create my characters. So inside my environment, Toon Family, I have a job called TF01 for Toon Family's Season 1, Characters. And in here, I have a scene for each of the characters that I will need to use inside the production. Some production like to put them into episodes. So let's say episode 1 has 5 characters, and these characters can be used in other episodes as well. But the first time a character appears in an episode, this is where the scene will be created to design the character. I like to have one job for all the characters here. So I'll select Toon, I'll open. This is the scene I already opened. The character was already drawn. The character is already rigged. I won't be showing you how to rig a character inside this webinar. If you want to see how to rig a character and get some tips, Mathis, one of our expert trainers, did a fantastic webinar last week. All the webinars are recorded and they're put online, so they're available on our website inside toonboom.com/webinar. Okay, so now I've created the rig, and I can show you quickly what the node, not the node library, the network looks like. So this is quite complex character, right? And now I'm ready to create a rig or a template out of this rig. After I've created the character, there's many different, not many different ways of creating, but there's different philosophies of should my rig, so the template that I create have just 1 frame, 10 frames, 100 frames? Should I have all the poses already in my rig when I create a template? Should I have some head turns inside the rig? This is all questions that production should ask before creating the templates. It all depends on the way you want to work. In this case, I will just have a scene with 100 frames, and I made some modification earlier to the hand here. And it's all the same drawings exposed throughout the whole scene, and there's no animation in there. And now I want to create the master rig for this character, and I want to store them in my library. So inside my library here, I have a Toon family folder. Let me just close it to show you how you can add those folders. So when I'm working in database and I open a scene, I have a couple of folders by default inside my library. I have an environment folder, which is global to all the scenes in this environment, to all the jobs. I have a job folder, which will be available to all the scenes in that job. And I have a local folder, which is local to that scene. Only this scene will have access to that. These folders are stored in your USDB, in your database, in your Harmony server. But you might want to store your rigs and your templates on another server somewhere, or on a file server rather than your actual Harmony server. And the way you do this is you just right click, you say open library, and then you're able to, you have a browser, and you're able to browse anywhere on your computer or anywhere on your network to select a folder you want to use. Normally, you want to use a folder that everybody has access to, because you want everybody to be able to go and pick templates, bring them into their scene, or store templates for later use. In my case, I won't be going over the network. I'll just going to be on a local folder on my computer called libraries. And I created a folder called Toon family. If I go inside, I already have a structure here. So I will just select that Toon family, select choose, and now I have access to that folder inside the library. It's basically just a folder structure on the file system, whether you're looking at it through the File Explorer or the Finder on the Mac. Let me show you what it looks like. Libraries, Toon family. So it's just a bunch of folders, and the library view is able to display those folders. And this is where I will want to store my templates for my production. So Toon family, I have a folder for my BGs, I have a folder for my characters, a folder for the new parts, and I have a folder for the props. I'll show you what the new part is a little bit later. So now I'm ready to create a master template out of this rig. If I'm using Harmony Premium, I really want to create my rig from the node view. So I'll go into node view, make sure I go to the top. I have a group here for my main character, and I have a peg. I always like to have a peg on top of my group, outside of my group, so that if I need to do a global change to the whole puppet, I can just use this peg here to make the change. So I select both of them, the group and the peg. I press Ctrl-C to copy, or Command-C. And then I go inside my library. I select the folder I want to use. And I need to get the rights to modify the folder before I do anything. It removes the little lock on the folder. And then I will be able to create a master template out of this. So I'll press Ctrl-V or Command-V. This will open a little pop-up. I'll call this master puppet. So I've already created templates earlier. So this will just be a copy of the other templates that I have. Click OK. And this is how I would create a template if I'm using Harmony Premium. The reason I'm doing this is that if I'm creating the template from the timeline here, I might not be copying everything that resides inside my node view here. But if I'm using Harmony Advanced or Harmony Essentials, I don't have access to the node view, so I cannot add anything that wouldn't be picked up from the timeline. So I will create my template from the left-hand side of the timeline. So I make sure I collapse the top peg. I select it. I copy. Use a copy command. I always just use the shortcut, Command-C, and I will go and paste this into my, my library. So this is the way you would do it on Essentials or Advanced. Now, this is a master template. And now I'm ready to use this template inside the scene. So I'll go and open the scene. So I'll open a blank scene here. So the way this usually works on large production is that you have a team, most likely called a setup team, that will open the blank scenes and will bring in the templates for the puppets that you have. So I'll bring in the background first, and I can drag this to my camera view or my timeline or my node view. I'll just drop this inside my camera view here. And this will automatically, when I drop it in the camera view, this automatically connects all the cables inside my node view right here. We just get rid of that when I don't need it. If I take my template and I drag them, so I'll take my master template, my Toon master, I'll drop it here. If I drag it to the node view, it won't connect it automatically to the composite, but at least it drops it under my mouse so I can move it wherever I want and connect it very easily. So now I have my character with the background, and the background is, let me just increase the quality right here, if I may. There we go. Whoa, that's a very, very heavy background. There we go. Looks a little bit better. And before I go on, I'll just log the background so I don't accidentally pick the background when I'm animating. So now I'm ready to animate my character. The setup team might as well just position the character at the right place, maybe scale the character to the right size as well, and then save the scene and pass the scene to the animator. The animator will start animating. I won't be animating this character because I'm really not good at animating. So what I have is I have some action templates. So action templates, what are they? So I'll just bring in the head rotation here. The action template contains keyframes of your characters, and you can bring those templates on the right-hand side from the timeline. So here we go, is the head turn. So let's say I'm a very good animator and I've animated this scene with the head turn and the guy skating. This is what the scene looks like now. Oops, and I forgot to extend my background. And there we go. And now I really like what I've done and I want to preserve that. I want to use this maybe later on. So I want to create an action template out of the head turn or an action template out of the character skating. I will do that from the right-hand side of the timeline. So I will collapse if I want, and I can select just a portion of the character or the whole character. But what I will usually don't do is I won't select the top peg that's outside the group or the group, because when I bring in an action template, I don't want to change the scale on my top peg if I made a change to the scale for that specific scene. So I'll try to select just the layers I want to get the animation from. In this case, the character pretty much moves everywhere. So I'll select the whole body, or maybe I could select just the upper body. So I have the upper body layer right here. So I select that. I select the keyframes I want to copy, press Ctrl C. I go into my action folder here, and I will paste it using Ctrl V. And when I paste, by default, it names the template using the name of the top layer inside the timeline. And that's kind of good because you want to know from which layer it comes from. I will just call this head turn upper body peg. And I click OK. So if I want to bring this inside my scene later on or inside another scene, I can pick that action template, drag it here, and you see that it only works if I drag it on the upper body layer. Let me just cancel that. Let me open this. Let me drag it again. And you see when I move my mouse over the upper body, I see the orange region that tells me that if I drop, this will drop the actual action. And where was my character? It was all the way over there, but didn't really make sense anymore because he wasn't there. But there we go. I've copied the action at those frames. Now, the action templates are the only templates that you create from the right-hand side of your timeline. The reason is that you don't want to create a master template from the right-hand side, because when you're creating this from here, you don't get the full structure of your character. You only get a partial structure. And you need to be careful with the action template. If I make a modification to my puppet and I want to reuse an action template onto a new version of my puppet, the action template won't work because it doesn't have the same amount of layers in my timeline. The layers are not in the same order. So if you do make modification to your puppet by adding layers, you will need to recreate your action templates. Now, another thing that's really important to be efficient when you're working on a production is that as I'm working, as I'm animating, I will need to draw some new hands, some new mouth, some new body parts from the character. And at one point, I want to bring those back to the master template so that the next time the master template is brought into a scene, it already contains those new drawings. So the next animator using that template will not have to redraw those hands. So how do we do that? So the animator created a new hand, and now this hand needs to be brought back to the master template. There's a couple of methodologies that can be used. Either this scene can be flagged on the tracking system as having some new drawings, and then you mention which layer was modified, which the drawing were added to which layer and at which frame. And then the design team will go open the scene and will find the layer and find the frame, and they will pick the drawings from there and they will add them to the master template. Another way to do it is to have, let's say in your library, a new parts folder. I'll take the rights to modify that. So let's say I make a modification to the hand. So I duplicate the hand, I created a new hand here, and I add on the color art, there we go, claws to his hand. So I have a new drawing that's not part of the master template. I will find the layer inside my timeline by pressing the O key. So when you have a layer selected or an object selected in the camera view and you go in the timeline, if you press the O key, this highlights the layer inside your timeline. And now I'll just take this drawing and I'll create a template out of it. And this is called Toon hand, whatever. I click OK. And then the design team will go, they will open back the original scene and they will bring this template back into the Toon hand layer and they will create a new version of the rig. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if there's any question. There must be a lot of questions because I've been talking for a long time.
Please feel free to continue to type in your questions. We do have about another 6 to 7 minutes. Timothy's question is, when working on a specific scene, can others access the scene, or will Harmony lock the scene so no one can ever write the work that you have been doing?
Yeah, so when you're working on a Harmony server, the Harmony server keeps track of who opens a scene and if somebody has a lock. So if I go back to my file open, what scene is that? Yeah, I'll save the changes because this is such a fantastic animation. So when I am in the database browser and I select a scene, on the right-hand side here, I have a couple of checkboxes. Get rights to modify scene, get rights to modify scene version, and get rights to modify all assets. By default, the two first ones are selected. So when I open the scene, I will get the rights to modify the scene, which means I will be able to make modifications to the timing. Actually, it's not allowing me to make modification, it's allowing me to change, to save my modifications. So if I open the scene with that, I will have the right to make modifications to the scene. And if somebody else opens the scene, so I'll just start another instance of Harmony here. If somebody else opens the scene, he will not be able to get the lock. So this protects from having two persons working or saving to the same scene. So I'm able to open the scene, so I'm able to see what's the current state of the scene, but I get a warning saying that this scene is locked by me on my computer, and it was open at 2:54. So the scene is open in read-only. So I'm able to look at the scene, I'm able to change the timing if I want to. But if I try to save the scene, I won't be able to because the scene is in read-only. So I won't be able to save the changes to the scene. And actually, Harmony has different levels of lock. There's a lock on the scene, so for the timing. There's a lock on the palettes and on the palette list to modify the palettes in the palette list. And there's locks also on the drawings. So I can take the lock to a specific drawing, make modifications. So when I have the lock, I know that nobody else is able to make modifications and save changes to that.
Cool. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback as well, and people are really happy with the webinar, and they're telling us that it's a lot to absorb, and it really provided a lot of information. So thank you. So next question is from Ina. Ina is saying that if the master rig is updated, would the action pose be updated as well? But then she has a follow-up and says, I mean the files with action.
So if I add new drawings inside the master template, the action pose don't contain those drawings, but that's okay because when I take my master template and I bring it into a scene, it copies all the drawings that are in the template into the scene. Even if they're not exposed, even if they're not visible, like the templates I brought in for this character contains a couple of different hands, though only drawing one of the hand was exposed in the scene. So when I bring this master template that has the new hands inside the scene, the new hands will be there. They won't be visible. They won't be exposed. And if I bring in an action template, that template was created before the drawing ever existed. So the template doesn't contain those drawings, but it doesn't matter because the action didn't use those drawings. So when I bring the action will be laid out in my timeline. I will be able to see the action. And if I want to swap to the new drawings, since they are in my master template, I will be able to swap to them easily.
So Federico has an interesting question. So hypothetically, 3 persons can work simultaneously on one scene?
Only one person will be able to save the timing changes. When you're working on cutout animation, you don't have there's not a lot of point in having multiple person working in the same scene because you'll have one animator that's animating the whole scene. When you're working on a more traditional production, you will have a lot of things to do after. So the animation was drawn on paper, it was scanned in or was drawn inside the software, and then it needs to be colored in. And one thing you can do is you can actually open the scene and take the lock on just specific drawings. So one person will color character A, another person will color character B, and they all work on the scene at the same time, as long as they're not modifying the timing, they're just modifying the colors, they will be able to do that. You can also work on different versions of the scene. So when I save a scene, I can save, well, I don't have the lock on this one, haha. If I go to save, advanced save, I can save different versions of the scene. So as I go forward, I save backup of the scene. This just saves the timing. All the drawings are common to all the versions of the scene. And when I open the scene, I can just lock the current version. So you can have 2 persons working on different versions of the scene at the same time. I hope that answers the question.
That does answer the question, and that also brings us right to 3 o'clock. So just in case you have any other further questions regarding this webinar, you can always email us at webinars@toonboom.com, and we will be happy to answer your emails and your questions. And if you missed anything in this webinar, you can always go to toonboom.com/webinars later this week, if not probably Monday or Tuesday of next week, and you can catch the recording online. We'll have one more webinar with Marc-André next week, and we really hope you can join us. And hopefully we answered all your questions. And Marc-André, you're the best at Harmony out there, so we thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for attending, everybody. See you next week.